You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. I think we're live. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Jacob Danzy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Involved. With me is Ann Berwick, Director of Sustainability at the City of Newton. Thanks, Ann, for joining.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, and today we'll kind of be talking about the success of Newton Power Choice and how they have increased the amount of opt-ups as well as setting the default renewable energy rate to 60%, which is pretty remarkable. So before we begin, I'd like to quickly just kind of talk about the agenda of what we're going to be talking about. It'll be about 20 minutes of us doing some questions and a demo of the involved survey that we did, as well as the results that we got. And then we have some time at the end for Q&A from the audience. There is a chat box in the far right-hand section. If you leave any comments there, we'll be sure to address those at the end. So yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about Newton Power Choice and community choice aggregation, the survey that we ran and the results that we got, the energy bid process and the success that Newton had there, and then some continuous outreach that we're doing as well as the city. Cool. Thanks again for joining me for this. I think we'll just get right into it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people out there who probably already know what Newton Power Choice is, but there's certainly a few on here who might not know what community choice aggregation broadly is. If you'd like to kind of give a high level,
Sure.
High level idea of what community choice aggregation is.
Yeah. So Massachusetts is one of probably 7 or 8 states that have community choice aggregation laws, and our law essentially enables a city or town to go out and buy power on behalf of all the electricity customers in that city or town, instead of having the utility do it on behalf of those customers. So, for example, in Newton, Eversource distributes power, and it also buys power on behalf of most electricity customers. Instead of having Eversource buy the power, the city or town can do that, and Eversource still delivers it. And that's what a municipal aggregation program is. It's authorized by Massachusetts state law.
And where does the green aspect of that come in with at least Newton Power Choice?
Yeah. So the first 100 or so cities and towns that did aggregation plans did them without a green, a renewable component. And since then, a number of cities and towns, probably about 40, have added a green component. So what that means is when Eversource or National Grid or whoever your electricity electric utility is delivers your power, they're obligated by state law to deliver a certain percent of it from certain kinds of renewable sources like solar and wind. This year it's 14%. But with the municipal aggregation, the city or town can provide however much more renewable power it wants to.
Great. And I know there's been a bit of confusion between Newton's aggregation plan and actually something that Cambridge's aggregation plan. I was wondering if you care to talk about some of the differences and maybe address some of the confusion between those two plans.
Yeah, sure. And so Cambridge has chosen to do something quite different with its aggregation plan. Sort of at a high level, what Newton does is chosen 60% as its default level. That's the 14% that state law requires plus an additional 46%. I'll just call it 60%. So if you do nothing at all and you're a Newton Eversource basic service customer, you end up being part of Newton Power Choice and getting 60%, the equivalent of 60% of your electricity used from renewables. And it's state law that says if you do not, makes it an opt-out program. That is, if you do nothing, you get the default level. So Cambridge has done something quite different. Instead of doing some percentage like that, it's put a 2 mil adder on the bills of everybody who participates. And its intention is to use that 2 mil adder instead of buying the equivalent of some percentage from renewable resources, to use that 2 mil adder to build solar in Cambridge. Newton has taken quite a different approach. We don't have an adder. We're doing the 60% as the default. Plus, we're using a state subsidy called SMART. That's the acronym, SMART.
Right.
I couldn't actually tell you what it stands for. We're
Sounds
using
smart,
the state subsidy to build solar on an additional 17 city facilities. We already have 12. So we're going to have 29 city facilities like parking lots and school roofs with solar. Cambridge, so we're getting the 60% plus solar on 29 facilities separate from aggregation. Cambridge is using its aggregation to, instead of doing some percentage, to build solar.
Got it.
But it actually hasn't done that. So I don't want to be critical of what Cambridge is doing because there's nobody here to actually talk about why they think it's preferable. But we obviously think we're getting more greenhouse gas emissions benefits from our program.
Great. Kind of to take a step back to sort of like the beginning when we first met and sort of what kicked that off. Actually, here in Newton, there's an energy group called Green Newton, which ran their own survey asking residents if they were willing to pay extra for renewable energy. And that kind of got the city thinking we should probably run our own survey to verify this. But just at a high level, asking residents if they're willing to pay extra, what does that actually like mean, and what's that related to with the default rate?
Yeah, that's a mouthful of questions, right?
Yeah.
So Green Newton did a survey by kind of standing out in front of supermarkets and like asking people if they'd be willing to pay, and if so, how much more for renewable power. And they, based on their survey, determined that I think it was something around 80% of people would be willing to pay more, and the average was somewhere around $6 or $8. Then the mayor decided it would be appropriate for us to do our own survey. Not, and I want to emphasize this because she's making decisions according to the polls, but just to get a sense of where the community was on this.
Right.
So we did both. Used your extremely helpful online mechanism to ask questions about willingness to pay, and we did a traditional, statistically meaningful telephone poll.
Yeah. Do you want to talk more about? Because I think one of the things we discussed is we're sort of involved is kind of a different animal. I mean, it does surveys, but its intention is more about just broad outreach and engagement because we're trying to make it really easy. So I want to talk more about sort of the goals in running both the traditional one as well as what we were trying to get from using Involved.
Yeah. So the traditional survey only reached out to I think it was 150 phone calls.
Okay.
So that's, or 200. I think it was 150. So that's not obvious. It's very useful to do a traditional poll, but it doesn't spread the word about the program. And we were using your mechanism both to get feedback for us and also as a way of educating the community. I mean, we've done a ton to educate the community about Newton Power Choice. This was one more mechanism of educating the community, saying to people, hey, this is out there and this is what it's doing.
Right.
And
it requires, a button press and kind of it does its own legwork.
It's really easy. Yeah.
Cool. I think that's a good segue. I'll talk a little bit more just about the Involved and kind of the idea of it as a survey software, and like you said, with engaging people. So what Involved really is we're trying to make the easiest way to gather large-scale feedback. So we focus on a single question that goes out through 3 channels: email, text and social media. And residents can, this also integrates with your contact list. So we're able to integrate with the mayor's newsletter through Constant Contact. And we sent out the question that way. And people can click to answer directly inside the email, and also are then prompted to share it, where it's kind of spreads on its own organically. And really our goal is to give everyone a chance and opportunity to provide feedback. So it's not so much statistical significance as it is just really trying to open the doors for everyone to provide feedback on a question that we're focusing on.
And we were interested in getting feedback for a couple of reasons, but we were also just interested in spreading the word on Newton Power Choice because
Right.
it's an opt-out program by state law.
Mm-hmm.
So people didn't have to participate, but they had to do something in order to get out of it. And so we were initially, turns out we were wrong. We were concerned that getting more renewable power would cost more.
Right.
Turns out it hasn't.
Which is great.
Which is awesome. But we wanted to make sure that people who are really struggling to pay bills, to make choices, who were making choices between food and medicine,
Mm-hmm.
weren't paying more if they didn't want to.
Right.
And so we really wanted to get the word out. We also wanted to get the word out because we wanted people to opt up to 100% if they could afford to and were so inclined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I'm actually going to switch to my computer screen, and we can actually take a look at the question that we put together, which we ran back in November. So the question is up here in the subject line. You can see, would you be willing to pay more on your electricity bill for additional clean, renewable electricity? And here's the different options that we came up with: 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. So each email that was sent out is unique to the person who's receiving it. So as soon as they click to answer, it captures their response, and then they can then share the email and also leave comments and share the question that way. So it's a really easy way to immediately get someone's response just by clicking. And I think one of the important things too is that background section, which Anne, you were saying, was used as education to let people know, okay, what is this program? How does it affect me? What's really being asked? So this is really a great way to engage with people.
And I want to emphasize, this isn't the only way that Newton has communicated to residents and businesses about this program. The mayor, in her State of the City address more than a year ago, said that I was going to give 100 talks around town on Newton Power Choice.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It does, doesn't it? I think I've given about 50, but we've had people sitting in the library handing out information about Newton Power Choice. We have, there are banners in front of, when you walk into City Hall, there are banners, there are signs all over, yard signs. So we've been very active in getting the word out.
Great. Just to show how it looks to respond to this question from a resident's point of view, works great over mobile. You just click to answer the question, and then it prompts for comments, which we actually found to be incredibly useful.
Very useful, really useful.
And then after you leave a comment, it's then prompting you to share the question, and people can just click another button to post the question directly to their Facebook, their Twitter, share the link that way. And we created this specific share image, which is just like way more engaging and had a lot more people activated on social media because of that. So we're really excited about the results of this specific share image as well.
Yeah, I think I really can't emphasize enough how useful I think this was in helping us to get the word out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I'll pull it up in a sec, but the outreach strategy was, we did the city's newsletter, the city's website, a few activist groups kind of helped push it out. But really, it just kind of spread from those initial emails and got nearly, 3,000 or so responses. Were you surprised by sort of the quantity of initial feedback that you got?
No. I think there's a lot of civic engagement in Newton, which is a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really useful to have the specific responses and know. I mean, I had a sense from doing my 50 or however many, meetings with citizens about what the concerns were. but it was really useful to see all the written
Right.
responses, and then we did a frequently asked questions,
Yeah.
and posted those so that we could respond to people's concerns.
Yeah. We have a heat map pulled up. So this is the dashboard for the involved account for the mayor. As you can see, here's the question we ran, and it had 3,380 responses, and showing that as a heat map for Newton. I think this was just a great way to emphasize sort of maybe some of the patterns that we were or were not seeing, but also like just how many people across the city end up responding to this question. But just like from a high level, we see that there's like 24% of people were interested in the $20 option, 34% in the zero. It's obviously um, pretty sort of like a polarizing question where you have a bunch of like hard yeses and hard nos. Were these results surprising at all once they started coming in? Did they line up with the traditional poll that
Well,
was
it's
run?
really interesting how aligned all the information we were getting
Mm-hmm.
was. So the Green Newton sort of supermarket poll, that was like 80% of people willing to pay more. But of course, you're not capturing the people who say, "Leave me alone, I need to buy my groceries."
Right.
Um, then the involved poll, I don't know if we've actually said what the results were, but they showed about a third of people not wanting to pay any more, and then about a quarter willing to pay $20,
Mm-hmm.
and then about 40% or so um, willing to pay somewhere in between. That was remarkably aligned, actually, with the telephone poll. The telephone poll also said about a third didn't want to pay anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got about a half, actually, saying yes to $20.
Wow.
So more people on the telephone poll saying yes, but still pretty well aligned. And then I'm aware also of a poll that a gubernatorial candidate did asking, and I'm not sure what exactly the question was, but I think it was something like, would you be willing to pay more than $5 for more renewable power?
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to pay $5 for more renewable power? And this was statewide, and more than half the people said yes,
Mm-hmm.
they would
Wow.
be, or somewhere around
Yeah,
between
so it's
50
all
and
like very
60%.
similar
So
amount.
the results are not startlingly different. So we're not just talking about Newton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, people want to do something about climate change.
Right.
But then the interesting story, I think, for Newton Power Choices end up costing people a lot less
Right.
than Eversource basic service for now, anyway.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw, at least from our results too, is so the initial email went out to the mayor's list, but over 1,000 of the people that responded came in just from people sharing it. So nearly 25% of the people who ended up actually even answering this question was all viral activity from people sharing on Facebook and Twitter, and we were able to kind of bring those responses in and actually make them a part of engaging on this topic where we might not have been able to reach them at least as easily in other ways. And that's something we can see just from the engagement on the email blast that we ran. It had a 53% open and a 21% click. And for those who, to kind of quantify this, an average like regular survey link, you typically see like 2-3%. Mm-hmm. So Newton's question was almost 10 times more, at least effective in terms of reaching people and engaging them and having them actually end up responding. But even more, I mean, the quantitative data was great, but the qualitative data and just the sheer number of comments from people who ended up responding was amazing. Right? Yeah, we had to keep increasing the length of the comment box that we can submit. And as you can see, we had 600 and this is the comment section. We had 631 eventual comments came in on this, and they were all like personalized. A lot of them were like, Dear Ruth Ann, and it was really interesting to see that kind of have that personal touch. But what we did was we were able to sort through the comments based on how people responded and put together a report where we broke down what were people saying, and sort of the top comments and frequently asked questions that way. So we had this report put together, and here's kind of the beginning of the report. But what we were really excited about was what we could do with all these comments, where we took all the comments, broke them down into a couple different groupings, whether they were not interested in opting into the program, or they were in support, or any questions, concerns. And a lot of people had other strategies for how to fight climate change, and it just gave us a really high level view of pretty much what people were thinking on both sides of the issue. A lot of comment ones were like 19% of people said that they might not be able to afford it, or what about fixed income and elderly. And when you go down to people who support, you see it's a lot of thank you and people who are willing to opt up. So it was great to see that. But what we did was we took all of these top questions and concerns and broke them down into a frequently asked questions page, which we had Anne put together some great responses for, and sent that back to everyone who already answered this question, basically thanking them for responding and leaving comments and addressing these concerns. And I think that was a really great way to show that these are being read, we are engaging with them, we're listening, and yeah, it was just a great engagement tool. But how, other than that follow-up work, were the comments and sort of the report that we put together useful just going forward in other ways?
I thought it was really useful. I think it's incredibly useful, just governance strategy. So getting away from specifically Newton Power Choice, just a way of involving people in what their government is doing and their views of what we should be doing, and if they disagree, addressing those concerns.
Right.
So I just think, especially in light of all the cynicism that's out there, I just think this is a really great way for government to behave. The other thing I wanted to raise is, in some ways, what we're seeing maybe raising some questions in people's minds, because we were asking all these questions about how much more would you be willing to pay.
Right.
And then at the end of the day, we go out to bid and for power, and we're saving people money.
Right.
So first of all, we never promised people that we would save people money. We were hopeful that we would save people money. Second of all, we have a 22-month electricity contract under Newton Power Choice. So the cost of electricity under Newton Power Choice will be stable for 22 months, but Eversource's price for residences changes every 6 months. So our price is stable, and Eversource's price is going up and down, and every 6 months. So maybe at some point, Eversource's price is going to be less than Newton Power Choice. Right now, Eversource's price is substantially above Newton Power Choice. So what we've said to people is, right now we're saving you actually quite a bit of money. For the sort of typical Newton customer, we're saving them at the 60% default level, $16 a month on their bill. And if they opt up to 100%, saving them $13 a month.
Still, right, you're still saving
great.
Money. Yeah.
But we aren't saying, well, it's going to save you money over the entire 22 months. It probably will.
Like on average, it's still...
On average. But there may be times, like during the summer when Eversource's rates are really low, that Eversource's rates are lower than ours.
So was that the biggest factor when the city went out to bid, and they basically saw how much cheaper it was in terms of the mayor's decision to select that 46%, 60% renewable energy?
Well, I mean, I think we had gotten enough response on the polls, and then on all of my talks, that we knew there was a very substantial sentiment in Newton to address climate change through this mechanism, because this is a super effective way that people with just one and done, right? They just sign up and then
Hmm.
or don't sign up, just go with the 60%, and they're doing something important to address climate change. So we knew that it wasn't just the money that was concerning people.
Hmm.
Um, so given that, the mayor had been willing to say, well, we're willing to say the default rate is going to be set at a level that will cost a little bit more for people, knowing that people could opt out.
Right.
But then when we got the bids, which were
Right.
so favorable, it was like, well,
Right.
let's go high.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, it obviously worked out great, and making it cheaper for everyone just makes the whole process way easier and smoother.
Yeah.
Um, and what that allowed us to do, at least, is the follow up work following that that result. So basically, we can now go back to everyone who responded, who chose, 5, 10, who chose, that they're willing to pay extra, and let them know, like, hey, now's the time to do so. And we were able to send out a couple follow up emails explaining that it was cheaper, and then linking directly to the website where the opt out form was. And we ended up, over the course of those two follow up emails following that bid, had like 600 unique people end up clicking on that link to go to that site. And obviously, we'd like to think all those people ended up opting up, and probably a good amount did. So it's great for us to segment the list down to the people who are supporters of this program, and then continue to follow up with them to make sure that they do. And I think you mentioned something earlier about opting up, and people are busy, and it's nice to be able to just have these touch points where it hopefully takes 5-10 minutes to actually opt up. You just got to get them at the right time that they're willing to do
Yeah,
so.
I mean, opting up is you call a phone number or
Right.
you do it
Yep.
online, and the only thing you have to know when you do it is you have to have your Eversource account number,
Mm-hmm.
your utility account number. It's really easy. And also knowing as a result of the responses to the involved questions, we could then say things like, well, okay, you're willing to pay more. How about you take a yard sign?
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have
Yeah.
taken yard signs.
I think just engaging with people. I mean, even in the comments,
Yeah.
a lot of people are asking for the yard signs. You can see them driving around.
But I really want to emphasize, I think this mechanism, apart from how important I think municipal aggregation is, green aggregations are, I think this is just a really important governance tool, which is not to say that decision makers in the city or state should be governing by polls, but it's a conversation
Right.
that it's important for decision makers to have with constituents.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think we kind of try to step away from polls a little bit, where we can do just the regular polling, but it's also we can also just like drive action with questions as well. And I think that's sort of touching on what I'm hoping to do going forward. I can briefly pull it up. So I had this idea for a follow-up question, basically asking people, have you opted up to 100% renewable energy yet? So this hasn't gone out, but it's just kind of a concept where we have a few different options. And based on how someone responds to this question, we'll follow back up with a immediately reply that's a targeted update. So if someone says, yes, I'm already done it, we basically thank them and ask them to share the question. If someone says not yet, we can send them the link. If someone says they're not interested, we can maybe remind them that they can opt out if they want to. So this is just another way to engage with people and learn more about who we should be focusing on, but also making people feel a little bit more a part of the process. Great.
I guess I also want to emphasize.
Yeah.
Well, not so much emphasize, just add. So Newton and Brookline's football teams are big competitors. So we now have a competition going with Brookline, beat Brookline.
Yeah.
To have the highest percentage of people up to 100%. So we're hoping that will drive more opt-ups.
That's a good way to do it. Are there any other outreach things going on right now, or is mostly the talks and then kind of the posters and yard signs that we're
Yeah,
seeing
and
around,
the
and
Beat
the Be and the Be
Brookline
Brookline?
effort. Yeah,
Yeah.
Green Newton a couple weeks ago distributed 10,000 door hangers.
Hmm.
Beat Brookline.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's pretty incredible. Um, well, great. I mean, I think that's all we had, at least for our part. Now we'd love to open it up for some Q&A. It seems like we already have a few questions from the chat. The first one: did the responses correspond to certain demographics, such as a younger group responding via email versus a phone poll? Any interesting outcomes like that? Do you know from the phone poll if there's any specific demographic differences?
that's a good question. I don't have the answer
Mhm.
to that. Do you know for
I have an interesting anecdote, slightly different.
okay.
So when we ask the question, we ask people to enter their address. This is an optional ask, and one of the interesting kind of not necessarily demographics, but you can tell from the poll itself that the people who actually entered their address were um, far more likely to be in support of the energy, or in support of more energy. And I think that's because someone who sees it over email and just immediately wants to, saying zero, they just click the button and forget about it. And so as you can tell, just from people who are interested in, who took the time to put in their address, we were, 12% more likely support um, to support opting out.
Well, when I've given talks at like community housing developments and also at the senior center,
Mm-hmm.
it's not at all the case that um, those constituents were opposed,
Yeah.
if they could afford it, to paying more.
Right.
I mean, $1 or two, but even more in some cases. There was not a shutdown in those
Right.
with those constituents.
Yeah, that's great. I think we didn't collect demographic information. That's part of us just trying to keep it as simple as possible. And we hope maybe the heat map would help. But I think even looking at that, you can kind of see that there wasn't really any distinct patterns.
Well, I'm looking at that map,
Yeah.
and there are plenty of $20 dots in sort of the less affluent
Right.
neighborhoods.
And it's kind of interesting to see that pattern
Mm-hmm.
visually. So here's another question: why did Newton choose a 22-month contract?
Yeah. So we went out to bid in November of 2019, and we actually put out requests for answers to our RFP, asking for pricing information for varying amounts of extra renewables, that is extra over the 14%. So we asked for pricing information for 20% more, 30%, 40, 50, 60, and for different lengths of contracts. So 1 year, 18 months, 22 months, 24 months, whatever, 30 months, etc. And we thought the most advantageous was this 22-month contract for 60%.
Nice. Cool.
Most advantageous from a price perspective.
So why do you think that Newton's pricing was so favorable, besides maybe the comparison to just it being winter?
Well, that's certainly one piece of it. That Eversource's, as I said, Eversource's prices change every 6 months for residences, more frequently for businesses. And their prices are higher in the winter. So from our point of view, it was advantageous to go out to bid right before the winter. So we could say, right now, and we always were clear about this, for the next 6 months, your prices will be advantageous as opposed to Eversource's prices. So that's definitely one reason. Another reason is, we were lucky that rec prices are simply, and power prices in general, were simply relatively low when we went out to bid in November. So, um, but I think it's also really important to realize that aggregations have a big advantage over the utilities basic service when they go out to bid. And it's not that they're aggregating, right? Because the utilities are aggregating too. They're bringing together all their customers. But the advantage is the utilities by state law are actually required to enter into contracts at particular times. Whereas aggregations can go out to bid, and if they don't like the responses, they can say no, thank you,
Mm-hmm.
and come back at a different time. So aggregations are able to sort of play the market in a way that the utilities cannot. It so happened that we got good bids
Right.
on the day that we went out to bid, but we could have,
Right.
if we didn't, we
You would have
wouldn't.
tried again.
We would have tried again at another time.
Right. Yeah, that's good. So I mean, basically, if it doesn't work at that point,
We have flexibility.
Right. Cool. Um, since the survey was forwarded and spread, how did you get the follow-up email out to as many people as possible beyond the initial list? Did you invite people to share their email with you? Yes, that's a question for me for sure. So that's exactly what we do. As the email spreads beyond that initial base, when people share it, we do ask for that next person who responds email address. So if you were to find the question on Facebook, or your friend forwarded to you, you can verify your response with a Facebook or Google login, or you can just type in your email address before you answer. So for us, we brought 1,000 new emails. We basically captured 1,000 new emails from social media and from people sharing it, and it's actually a great way for people to effectively grow their email list as well, as people share the question and are interested in maybe being added to the mayor's newsletter who they weren't on it previously. Um, what was the exact cost that you paid for the 22-month contract?
I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Actually, it's on the website. It's if you go to newtonpowerchoice.com, you can see our cost, and you can also see the basic service cost.
Great. I missed the first few minutes of the webinar. Did you mention the percentage of residents who opted up? I think I said it in a throwaway sentence, but it was about 4%.
Well, so far it's around 4%.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really low, and we don't have data on any other communities. But I think it's actually probably
pretty
higher
right.
than any other community. And people always ask me, what's your goal for the 100% opt up? And in my heart, I think 10% would be a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been reluctant to say that because it sounds low.
Yeah.
But I think, getting people to take any action on anything is hard.
Right. You got to basically put it right in front of their face and make it super, super easy, or else it's easy to forget about because people are busy.
I think,
right.
Yeah, people are busy.
So yeah, I think if we do this follow-up question, it'll be interesting to track kind of how many people said not yet, but they're planning on it.
I want to get up to 10%.
Right, and sort of follow that story that way. So we'll definitely keep updating with the kind of follow-up work we're doing.
And I know Brookline so far is well below that.
So be Brookline. Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Is November a historically low cost time for REC pricing? Or was that kind of the luck that you mentioned? I mean, I think it kind of goes into, being winter.
Yeah. Well, it was no accident that we went out to bid in November. Mm-hmm. So we thought that would be an advantageous time. Mm-hmm. And obviously, it's a time when the utilities rates are going up.
Great. I actually, are your renewables MA Class 1 RECs? Is biomass included? That one's you. I don't know what that means.
I know what the answer is. Yes, they're all Mass Class 1 RECs. And as a legal matter, under the Renewable Portfolio Standards Law, certain biomass is included. But as a practical matter, there's almost no biomass in the mix. It's mostly wind and some solar.
Great.
And I share the concern about biomass that's being raised here.
Okay. Cool. I mean, I think that's all we got right now. We can leave it up a little bit longer if anyone else has any more questions. But thank you. This was
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Yeah.
doing it,
Thanks
and
for
thank you
taking
for
the
all the
time.
work you've done for Newton.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It's definitely one of our first cities, and to see it just explode the way it did, and we're really hoping it can be something that kind of builds. I know we mentioned that we brought in a bunch of new emails, so we're hoping like, okay, the next time we run another question, they can be a part of that, and ideally we would like to try to reach more and more people with this as a way of engaging. So it's been
You might want to say
exciting.
how many distinct email addresses did you send to? It was like 30,
The unique emails, it was 16,000,
16,000.
and we had a 20%. Um, pull this back up.
Why is 34,000 distinct?
That's how many emails we sent, because we sent out
Oh.
the reminder twice.
Oh, okay.
But the actual individual people reached was 15,704, and then about 20% of those people ended up responding. And some of those clicks are on just like any link, so it could have been a link to the website, it could have been a link to an opt-up form, and then another 1,000 people ended up responding outside of the mayor's initial newsletter. How much does involved services cost to the city or other towns that might want to do it? Great question. We have two working models right now. One is an annual subscription, which allows the city or town to run unlimited questions for the year. It can be on whatever project that they want. That's tiered based on the size of the city or town. We can expect that the annual subscription to be probably a few $1,000s, couple $1,000s. And then we also have kind of these one-time campaigns where it's really focused on a specific issue, like Newton Power Choice, or where you're really just looking to run one question. And that would be a little bit less than that, but obviously not the annual subscription. So that could be $1,000 or so.
I think, am I wrong that actually some time ago a Newton City councilor used your services?
Yeah, we also work
to send out a question about the level of support or objection to charging a fine for people who fail to shovel their walks. Is that right?
Yeah, Emily Norton did a
Yeah.
question on the snow shoveling.
Yeah.
That was actually like one of our first ones, and where we really first saw that kind of viral component. So we also have a working model for. We've worked with a couple universities since then. We've also done some work with organizations and unions, and just like individual representatives at the local and state level. And like you said earlier in this webinar, it just seems like a great governance tool. It's not so much about the poll and the high level results as much as it is about just like creating a conversation and engaging with people. So we really have a pretty wide segment of customers right now.
Yeah, I think it's it's useful from the point of view of decision makers, but it's also, I think, important in terms of civic engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what we're
That's
going
what you're
for,
doing.
right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Is your energy solar or wind or both?
Yeah. Well, so it's Mass Class 1 REX, so it's mostly wind, some solar.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably a little, dribbles of a few other things. So not Canadian hydro, that doesn't count for the renewable portfolio standard, but there is some small hydro. Probably a little bit of landfill gas in there. There may be a small amount of biomass, but I'm not sure. Probably quite well may not be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's mainly onshore wind. Of course, in the next few years, Mass Class 1 RECs are going to be dominated by offshore wind.
Mm. Is that just like the new development stuff? Is there
Yeah.
new development stuff going on with that? Great. Cool. I think.
That it?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
I can throw this up and then leave it open in case anyone else has anything else. But again, thanks for participating, and I hope this was a very educational for everyone who's watching.
Yeah, thanks for everything you've done for Newton.
Awesome. Yeah, great. All right. Cool. Oh, that's it. Great. I can actually answer this one that just came in. Does Involved have access to emails that the town does not, so that using Involved can get out to more people? Uh, so the answer is sometimes and yes. So with Involved, we do ask for people's address, which allows us to figure out what legislative districts that they are in. And what we're trying to do is connect people to their representatives. So someone could sign up for Involved who happen to live in Newton, and then they would have received the question that the mayor sent out. So we are sort of building a network there where we're trying to just make it easier for people to engage with their representatives. But we also, on the texting side, with some of the new stuff we're doing, we are able to connect to the voter files. So that way we can take a voter list and send out text messages that way, and those often are new emails. But at least for this question, and initially with the people that we're working with, it builds off of the existing following that they already have from their newsletters and social media. So I can actually share some of the integrations that we have. MailChimp, Constant Contact. We work with NGP Van and Voter File, Nation Builder, a bunch of different integrations where people can start pulling their list and start actually like building off of those. Cool. All right.
Tell me when we're offline.
Yeah. It's delayed by about 20 seconds.